God did you dirty. Here's what I've been working through in the last couple days that comes up. And so oftentimes on a spiritual journey, you may be feeling this sense of desire to heal. And yet when we talk about like surrender, surrender will happen for you, through you. I'm not so sure we can force it. Yes, there are things that we can do to move forward, but it is really, if you've ever been on a river, it just pulls you, the flow pulls you. You can work with it a little bit for sure. Absolutely, because you can get tossed around, but there's a flow and a current in this surrendering that just, and it takes stillness. But one of the biggest things that has been coming up for me, part of it is through the work I do with psychedelics. And psychedelics and meditation have really helped me to understand myself at much deeper levels. And so no matter how you choose to go about it, I believe that the medicine, whether it's meditation, stillness, or psychedelics, you will receive what you can handle at that time. And what's really been coming up for me, I did a journey, and it's not like I'm always on them. I listen to my body, and I only do them when I feel called. And what came through was like this sense of like a God dying within. And I was trying to make sense of this from a standpoint of, we get this bigger information. And so you may be receiving things and we can take it literally, but that's our like lower consciousness needing to decipher it. And so if we can look at it from a broader picture and kind of interpret it different, we may have a better understanding. And what I realized, and if you come out of any Christian or heavily indoctrinized programming from religion, you may be experiencing where you have this deep, immense love for God, and yet also there's like this block that's not, where like things are not either working, or you're like, what does it take to surrender? And what I go back to is that for me, I had this experience of like God dying within me, like this very, very expansive energy dying within me. And what I have finally really come to realize is that, because I love God, and I'm like, God's not dying, I'm not dying. I mean, there's parts of me that are for sure dying, which is beautiful. What it was is the God that I was told, the God that I was raised with, these beliefs and patterns, a God that shunned me, judged me, did not like me, didn't like you, that you're wrong, that you had to look for it. You have to beg for mercy. You have to pray and say, oh, I'm so sorry, and my sins, and please forgive me, God, or please give me this, or why did you do that, or angry with God, because I was feeling sense of anger at God, not the source of all life that I know and believe to be true, but this God that I was taught and that I had formed at a really young age in my mind, in my subconscious, a God that was an asshole, essentially. And I could never, as a kid, make sense of that. Why I was here, why I was feeling these things, why I was gay, all of this, why do people not like me, or why am I judged, or why is there all of this shit happening in the world? And it was like this vengeful God. So that God is dying. And that God has to die within me. That pattern, those belief structures, not me, this space within all of who you are. There's this like, I think of it and imagine just like this circle of energies. This is God, this is God you were taught from when you were really young. And so it's just spinning there, and and it's catching more because, right, it catches as you're told more stories. It just gains momentum and it gets thicker. The energy gets thicker, and so it's moving and moving within you. And then you have this realization that there's something bigger, God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it. And that is far bigger, right? That is everything. That is the space that you are. But this pattern is going. And so although maybe we're surrendering or you're feeling that surrender, this God has to die. This patterning, these beliefs must die. And I've been having a lot of emotion around that because the unconditional love that I feel, that I know is there, that I've tapped into and that I sit with and that I'm embodied with and that you are of, is unconditional love. But that conditional God has to die. And how do we let that die? Well, we have to acknowledge it. I listened to a teacher, a channeler, Dara Anka, and he talked about Bashar, who he channels. And Bashar talked about AAA, but he named it that we want to acknowledge, we want to appreciate, and then allow. And so when we acknowledge, like, oh, there was a God, there was this God pattern, these God beliefs within me that I thought were God. And all of the other stuff that gets bound up in that, the shame, the guilt, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, a lot of anger within that must be acknowledged and looked at and then appreciated to be able to see it, appreciate to understand that that is not the truth. That's not your highest truth. And then to allow this new, even greater force, because you probably have already had a lot of that force within you, or at least I have felt it. But now I see that what I was being shown through the medicine and through my meditations was that God needed to die, needed to forgive, to love, to accept, and to understand that it's not true. And that's the crazy part, is that we think we can just, I thought for a long time that I could just like, okay, yeah, I understand this, now I can move on. But for me, there's this process in surrendering where it just is pulling the things out of you. So God's got to die. And that surrender becomes even more, because now if you are trying to surrender into a God belief that's running in the background that you haven't acknowledged, that is angry and fearful and judgmental and conditional, well, then I think it's going to be hard to surrender into that, because there's a part of your subconscious, this other part, that's looking at it like, no, I don't want to go towards that, or that is what God is, and why would we surrender into that, or I'm trying to protect you. All this other stuff fires up. But as you can acknowledge that pattern and allow it to kind of like dissipate and die, then you're able to make greater space and acknowledge this, allow in the broader space for you to be able to surrender into the truth of God or source. It's so cool. It's cool once you understand how to work with what is happening or how to interpret it. And I find my meditation practice is very key, and my use of psychedelics and the work that I do with that, not only for myself, but others, especially like in the corporate world, like this stuff is so great at helping us to see these patterns, right? To kind of open up some space, to break down some of the barriers that we have to wanting to look at things and being able to acknowledge. So I'm really sitting with that with today, because life, this journey is calling me to surrender into a flow that I trust and I know, but I can imagine it and I can envision it, but I don't know how and the who and the when, because that's not my job take action, yes, you want to take action, that surrender is going to be softened and empowered more because I now can allow this old God to die, that God within me to die, and the trust and the faith and the knowing of this new, this understanding the truth of God to carry me along. And then to relax into the moment and into the now, to be okay with that. And it's so funny because I was thinking about this the last couple of days and really feeling it. And I happened to open up a little book, and right there, the woman started talking about her same experience. That she was struggling to surrender into God because she had this false God, this God that did her wrong. And nothing's by chance. And so hopefully that helps you if you're in a place of wanting to surrender, or you're feeling this flow but stuck, or you've never really addressed that maybe you do have. Even if you weren't terribly religious, think about that. Even if you weren't terribly religious, the collective, the greater part of society has built everything around this vengeful God. So it may be something to look at. And hopefully that helps you. It certainly helped me to release into more surrender, not even to release into surrender, but to understand like this is showing up at the right time, because now that God can die. I can appreciate it. I don't hate it. I appreciate it that it's not me. But I can see how it was running so much of my programs, or the way my life was showing up. And even though I have this greater sense, that greater sense is pulling me through. This greater energy is pulling you through all of that noise. So that's what I'm with. And if you want to know more about psychedelics, or you're into those things, I would love to chat. Like I said, with this community, I want to start doing like a Q&A and some hot seat stuff. But that's stuff that I've researched a lot, and I want to bring on the show like some actual experts to talk about like these different medicines, and not just the trippy part, but how we can really help them to open ourselves up. And there's all sorts of modalities. It happens for people in many different ways. So much love. Cheers.